One SA leader Mmusi Maimane wants former Eskom CEO de Ruyter to name and shame and give proof. De Ruyter said in that explosive eNCA interview last week that senior politicians were aware of and involved in widespread corruption and criminal activity relating to the coal mafia at Eskom. Well, Mmusi Maimane joins us now. Mr. Maimane, thank you so much for your time. You know, what you're trying to get sounds quite similar to what the ANC is asking for. They also want to know the names, the people that De Ruyter is referring to. They also want to see proof and evidence. Are you and the ANC pretty much on the same page on this particular issue?
Good evening, and good evening to fellow South Africans. I think more crucially, it's worth our while to remind ourselves that when the president appeared before the Zondo Commission, he made it quite clear that the ANC is accused number one. So I don't think we could be on the same page regarding corruption. It's just an exercise in deflection. My fundamental issues here are, as far as PRECA is concerned, Mr. De Ruyter is compelled by law, when there's corruption over the value of 100,000, that he must report it to a police station. But furthermore, I'm asking for the confirmed now Minister, Pravin Gordhan, who this matter was spoken to, because if people find themselves in a conversation about corruption, that to me is tantamount to collusion. And therefore, Mr. Pravin Gordhan must be able to appear to the nearest police station and also confirm the details of this corruption. Now, given that Mr. Gordhan is also a minister in a cabinet, I would assume that given the nature and the stakes of what load shedding is, as citizens all over the country are spending days in the dark, that this matter should have been reported to cabinet and the president should ultimately be informed. So I'd like to know what actions were taken and what forms of accountability is going to come about. I genuinely ask that when we fight corruption, we must fight it, and I've committed that money must be returned back to the coffers.
So just on Pravin Gordhan, I'm just trying to understand, what do you know and what do you suppose happened? Because it's so confusing, because we know that the coal mafia, for example, has been reported to the police, has been investigated. We've seen arrests. We've also seen concern that some people are just let off the hook. But regarding what De Ruyter said in that interview about high-level political involvement, his allegations, he did not name names. He didn't mention the name of Pravin Gordhan, yet you're mentioning it now. Do you have proof that De Ruyter spoke directly to Pravin Gordhan, or are you presuming that that is what happened? Just take me through that.
Well, based on what's happened in the last number of hours, Minister Pravin Gordhan himself has confirmed that, in fact, that he was the one spoken to, and ultimately, as the Minister of Energy, you can't have people committing treasonous acts inside such a national key point and for no action to be taken. He makes the statement as if these are illusions that Mr. De Ruyter is putting, whereas in fact, South Africans aren't under an illusion that the lights are not on or that money has been stolen, or as the recent budget indicated, that we are bailing out Eskom. It's now time that we rather stop talking about conjecture, etc., that the police get involved, a thorough investigation is put on the table, and ultimately that those with evidence must be compelled to come and bring it. That's what South Africans are demanding, and that's what the fight of corruption requires. We saw it in Mnguni. It was the same. We started with a criminal case and then proceeded to hold President Zuma accountable. I will do the same ultimately to this particular government, and certainly with Mr. Gordhan and Mr. Ramaphosa must be accountable. They must give evidence to the people of this country.
I mean, it's interesting because you're saying that there's a legal requirement compelled by law. This information has to be reported to the police, and you're just looking for that proof, essentially. But the ANC is also saying, look, show us the proof of what exactly you're alluding to. Where do we go from here on this particular issue? I mean, it's really set the cat among the pigeons, and it's just creating a great deal of confusion and anxiety, and let's face it, anger, while we're in the midst of an electricity crisis.
Yeah. And, you know, Sally, when I started the 10-point plan, I said one of the issues to fight is about corruption. And now the steps we go from here is that a case number will be issued to me. An investigating officer will be allocated to the case. Third, for that, it's not upon Mr. De Ruyter or anybody else He has made the allegation. PRECA compels him to give a supplementary affidavit substantiating his allegations. Evidence must be sought. And it's a question now of an actual investigation taking place. And then ultimately, if the president is true to his word that he ultimately wants to end corruption, an SIU proclamation can be issued. Because if he himself knew about this, his oath of office compels him not only to protect the Constitution, but all of its related laws, of which PRECA is but one. So he has to act, he has to be compelled. And what we as citizens ought to do now is, given that we'll have a case number, an investigating officer, is to actually put pressure on the police to investigate. We cannot be dependent on the political process. We know that if it was left up to the politicians, we've heard a lot about the sabotage and poisoning cases. That's not what we are interested in. We are interested in recovering the billions that have been stolen from Eskom and, in fact, keeping the lights on so our economy can move on. So it's us taking control rather than dependent on what the executive chooses to do or not to do. They must be compelled here. And if they fail, if the police don't do their job, it's up to us to use legal means available to us to compel an investigation. That's the steps I'm beginning from today.
How do you view Andre de Ruyter, a whistleblower or failed CEO with a chip on his shoulder?
Yeah, I think both those things can be equally true. If he failed as a function, the fact of the matter is that, objectively speaking, we've had the longest stint of load shedding under his leadership. Whether those are historical factors or not is but one thing. But the second issue here is that he's entitled to say what were his reasons. And if he cites corruption and maladministration occurring and led by senior members of government, then that equally remains true, and he must be given the adequate protection as a whistleblower. And I'm saying that evidence, if the next CEO of Eskom is aware of, the same action must take place, and he equally so, he or she must be compelled to lead evidence in arresting people. We can't keep hearing about these stories and no arrests being made. It either is an indicator of a failed state and a failed executive, or that in fact political collusion has meant that we are all under the oppression of this government that fails to, in fact, arrest criminals that are within its own ranks.
So, and I'm not sure, this is quite a few weeks back, but I know that Build One SA was part of a large group, I think of 18 people, calling for an end to load shedding. It was also calling, my understanding, for the 18% increase, which is due to happen in April, for that to be scrapped. So Eskom gave out its replying affidavit, I think it was today. It is incredibly comprehensive. I've read through it, and it details a history of bad political decisions, bad management decisions at Eskom, which explains very clearly why you can't simply stop load shedding, as you are asking. I'm just going to give a few of the points that really stuck with me. The well-known one, which is that the politicians refused to greenlight new power stations in the late 1990s when they realized they were going to have a massive power crunch because of how quickly people were being put onto the grid. Politicians said, no, we can wait a bit. The former CEOs, Koko and Molefe, blocking independent power producers from getting onto the grid. They said absolutely not. From 2015 to 2017, Eskom is saying that is one of the single biggest reasons why we're sitting with load shedding today. The directive from politicians to keep the lights on no matter what. You read through that, it is such a comprehensive breakdown of what has gone wrong. Yeah. And you read through the 5-point plan on what is being done to try and solve the problem. And indeed, some of those points are actually being enacted. I have to ask, are you going to drop that particular court case? Because it's obvious why. You can't simply stop load shedding.
The court case that we are leading, and that will appear in court in the next couple of weeks, has multiple aspects to it. The one is about stopping load shedding. Part of our plan was to say load shedding isn't the only type of action you can take to alleviate the grid shortfall. You've got a 20,000 megawatt shortfall that you've got to compensate for. You can choose the path of load shedding, and all of those reasons that they cite remain appropriate. But the second, which I've already proposed, is to say if you were to augment energy in the period of 2 to 4 years of bringing about SMRs, which are small modular reactors that are nuclear-based, that can be environmentally sustainable, you can be able to, in the period of time, be able to sort out load shedding. And furthermore, if you introduce a sense upon which some of the technical skills that go back into Eskom can come in, you can deal with some of these issues. So they've chosen a path, and it's a path we've become used to and assume that all of these stages is the only response we can have. Actually, there can be other alternatives on the table. Lastly, and most crucially, is that when you understand the nature of where load shedding is at and where this government's action is, part of our response in the court case is that there's critical infrastructure that can be taken off the grid, or some of it can use augmented energy. For example, sewage plants. A resident of Johannesburg knows very clearly that when there's load shedding, it's almost followed on by water shedding because sewage plants don't work so well and reservoirs don't work so well. And I'm asking that alternative energy be provided for that, and we must compel the state to be able to do so. And on other aspects like hospitals, etc. So part of their response is to say if we were to do that, we would collapse the grid.
Yeah.
And I'm going, at which point do we stop going? Well, lives of people in hospitals are being lost. Kids can't go to school.
So I get you, but on that point, which was really interesting, in fact, they're basically saying the hospital network is linked in, the electricity network is often linked into neighbouring areas. So if they did that, there's like over 3,000 hospitals. It would be so very difficult because huge areas, huge neighbourhoods would then be exempted from load shedding, which would mean the rest of us would be sitting in sort of stage 10, stage 11. Are you saying that that's probably what we should do then?
No, what I'm arguing for is that if you introduce an opportunity to introduce, again, I come back to SMRs, I come back to the fact that we've hosted multiple events in the recent while. Most recent, when I look at the city of Cape Town and their hosting of the Cricket World Cup, not a single day did lights go off at Newlands. How do we achieve that for a sports event with alternative generators, with all the funding that goes into it? Yet we can't do it for hospitals, for clinics, etc. It's not just a question of saying we exempt the entire neighborhood around it. It's about creating augmented energy for those particular national key points. You cannot have a hospital like Baragwanath going without energy. It means that children in incubators are going to die. So this is not a choice. We've been asked to be given a false choice. It almost feels as though the threat to South Africa's heads is to say, well, if we don't do load shedding, we'll go into complete darkness. Now, that is not entirely true. I would make the argument here. What I'm proposing is that certain aspects can be given augmented energy, and if you intervene at source, you can be able to keep those areas with lights on while continuing with your maintenance program and other sectors. So we just simply believe, we cannot just simply believe a management that over the last period of time has given us the panacea of load shedding as the only alternative on the table. We have to put all arguments on the table, and that's why this court case remains absolutely vital. We wouldn't have this information that you are alluding to had we not taken the government to court, because they were quite comfortable at hiding behind the facts. Now we are compelling them there. We will challenge them in court and furthermore get further action on the table.
I have to just for a point of clarity, and this may be my error, and if so, I apologize. You mentioned earlier that Pravin Gordhan said something earlier today admitting that De Ruyter had come to him around specific allegations of ministers involved in corruption. I don't see that anywhere, and I may be missing it. I wonder if you could detail exactly what was said, who he said it to, and how it played out.
He was on another rival television station in a news interview where he has gone out to say, I was the minister at which all of this was being spoken about being in question. But as he says, he reduces it to allegations or allusions. And whereas I'm saying is that is not good enough, Minister. South Africans require accurate information, and he must be compelled under oath to state the point as he makes it, rather than just simply relying on being distant.
No, thank you for explaining that, because I understand, that's why I haven't heard it, because I've been on air, but it's allegations, he says, and you're saying, sorry, no matter what you've got, you need to take it further. The reality is, rumours, allegations of corruption have been swirling around Eskom forever, but you believe, even despite so much that has come out of state capture, that he should have done something more. He should have gone to the police. Is that what you would have expected Gordhan to do?
When state capture began, the same information was emerging. We kept hearing of rumors here, Guptas there, etc., until we had a thorough investigation into getting the facts and figures. Now, we thought we'd finished state capture after the report, but in truth, we have not. So what I'm simply arguing and fighting for here is that actually we must treat it in exactly the same way, because coincidentally, as you and I have been speaking here, I've entered a stage of load shedding, and many South Africans have. So in all fairness, this is not just another form of money being stolen. It's economic opportunities, as businesses shutting down. It is that urgent. Therefore, before we appoint another minister of electricity, whatever, we need to come back down to saying a thorough investigation into corruption must be looted. For if we keep investing bailouts, we are effectively investing into a big black hole.
Thank you so much for chatting to us. Build One South Africa leader Mmusi Maimane there, explaining why he believes that not only Andre de Ruyter, but also Public Enterprises Minister Gordhan, who said this afternoon that he was the minister who Andre de Ruyter went to. He believes, Mmusi Maimane, that Gordhan also has a case to answer.